1, 2, 3, 4. I got thoughts running through my head. I got thoughts, can't you see? I got thoughts, the books I read. I got thoughts, won't you listen to me?
Hello and welcome to The Author Has Thoughts, my running commentary on all the novels that I've written. My name is Gary Ballard. I have so far written 12 novels, 5 novels in a Cyberpunk series called the Bridge Chronicles, and 6 novellas in a series called The Stepping Stone Cycle, which is based on Cthulhu Mythos of H.P. Lovecraft. I've also written one short story collection in the Bridge Chronicles universe called Tales from the Bridge Chronicles. Today I'm going to be talking about the first novel I ever published. The first book I wrote in the Bridge Chronicles series called Under the Amoral Bridge. It's not the first book I've written in this universe. If you've watched my previous video that discussed the Bridge Chronicles series as a whole and its inception, it actually was written as a bridge novel between the lore and backstory of that original series and the series itself. And I originally published it on a blog, weekly or bi-weekly, I have to check the dates, to try to get some kind of, traction, some kind of buzz going between agents and publishers and all that about this series. It didn't really work because I eventually ended up self-publishing myself because nobody paid attention. There was a few people that read the blog novel, but it wasn't enough to say a huge success, but it was enough that when I got done with it, I realized, hey, I should probably package this together for people who don't want to read it on the web. And ebooks were just starting to really gain traction at that point. And self-publishing with, I used a service called CreateSpace, which is now owned by Amazon, to publish a paperback. Then realized, hey, I'm leaving money on the table by not publishing an ebook. So I did that. And eventually, the ebook has sold fairly well, sold better than the paperbacks, quite obviously, because it's cheaper. Eventually, I decided to make the ebook 99 cents because it was a good way to generate more readers, and that actually seems to work. So I've kept that book at 99 cents, and the rest of the novels have stayed at $2.99. So if you've ever wondered why it's 99 cents, that's why. Now, we start the novel off with Bridge's signature phrase, "I know a guy." And he goes, "I know a guy were the only important words Artemis Bridge uttered these days. All of his conversations with those words were a carefully choreographed dance routine, each step planned out in advance, with only rare deviations from his expectations. Before those words came the usual bullshit, the greetings, the give-and-get probing Bridge used to determine if the prospective client was a cop trying to entrap him or a legitimate person with an illegitimate need. After those words, the dance was all details, the who-is and the where-wills and all the rest of the important minutiae that would get the job done. But I know a guy, those were the focal point of Bridge's life. Those words were the music that drove the dance." So Bridge's entire job revolves around knowing guys. You need black market weapons, he knows a guy. You need age play VR software, he knows a guy. He doesn't touch the goods. He doesn't produce the goods. He just tells you who to get them from and sets up a meeting and then gets his fee and gets the fuck out. He runs that gray area of the line with, I do know these people. I'm part of this whole conspiracy thing, but I don't deal with it. I don't touch it. It's not on me, so you can't arrest me. His entire net worth is based on finder's fees, essentially. And he's known in the underworld as the Amoral Bridge because he just doesn't care. He doesn't seem to have any morals about what he hooks people up with. As a matter of fact, he says many times in the course of the books that he knows both people on both sides of transactions are horrible people, and he hopes that they burn themselves up in a terrible dance of self-immolation because he hates them all. He's not a very nice person. He doesn't like people. So in the first chapter, Bridge meets with an entertainment executive, Brendan Timms, who is trying to find a leaker. And this is set in 2028, so it's about it's less than 10 years from now, but back in 2008, the idea of movies leaking to bootleg was still kind of fresh, and I thought, okay, well, let's extrapolate that. Let's make the bootlegs a part of the whole movie marketing machine. So the entertainment companies leak the file online using leakers, hackers that will hack into basically a honey trap that's not really a honey trap. It's set for them to find, but it's, security's not as tight. Even it's just enough security to make it seem legit, so that the hacker can go in and get it, but not really have much problem if he's not an idiot or a muppet. And so, Timms wants this leaker, and Bridge is like, fine, I got a guy, I know a guy, Now he doesn't specifically know who he's going to get, but he has sources. And then at the end of that chapter, and into the next chapter, he meets with just a typical street mob guy, Nicky Sharver, who administers a beatdown. Now, one of the things that I talked about in the last video is Bridge being that guy, that Peter Lorre character, where he gets you stuff, but he's also the guy that gets beat up by the main character, like in a Sam Spade, Humphrey Bogart, Philip Marlowe, type of noir story. He's the guy that gets beat up for information or other stuff, and so I wanted to get him a beatdown. I wanted to give the character a beatdown to kind of illustrate that. It's like, this is not your man of action. This is not the guy that you go to solve a problem. This is the guy you get to get you the guy that can solve the problem. And I was reminded or inspired by another character, another detective character that I watched as a kid, the Rockford Files. James Garner playing Rockford, who would always get his ass beat. In like the middle of the episode, he'd get a beat down, and then he'd end up turning the tables on the guys at the end. And I always love, I don't know why that kind of tickles me, but it's just always like, it's very much a formula of, okay, Rockford's going to get his ass beat at some point, and then he'll save the day in the end. Well, so there's the Bridge beatdown, and we also meet Aristotle, which is Bridge's bodyguard. Bodyguard in quotes, obviously, because he always says he doesn't have the money to pay Aristotle to be an actual bodyguard, to actually fight for him and put his body on the line for him. He just wants a big intimidating presence behind him. He says, and he says this, he wants the fear of the Black Planet behind him, which, Aristotle is a giant African-American man. Think the guy that played Tiny on Fridays and played the president in The Fifth Element.
Can I talk to you for a second?
Oh, shit.
That's exactly the guy I was thinking of. Kind of a Michael Clark Duncan character, but with kind of that, and it's funny how things change in your perception of people. I wanted the character to sound like, if you've ever watched, just back in the 80s, In Living Color, there were these skits by Damon Wayans, who was a black man who was in prison, and yet had learned, had read books and all that, and learned just enough to be dangerous, but his words always sounded odd. But his words sounded like he sort of was intelligent, but he was using words that he didn't know the meaning of, in the context that was not proper. Kind of like Kevin Kline's character in Called Wanda.
First of all, we must internalize the flatulation of the matter by transmitting the effervescence of the Indonesian proximity in order to further segregate the crux of my venereal infection.
But I wanted Aristotle to actually be he might sound like that, might have the the speech patterns of Tiny from Fridays, but he was intelligent. He had gone to prison. We find out later in the books he'd gone to prison, but he's working for Bridge to make enough money to go to school at night to get a degree. And he talks philosophy, he talks economics and politics and all this sort of stuff. So he's not a dumb guy, but he may sound kind of dumb. He only sounds dumb though because the people he's talking to may not understand the words that are coming out of his mouth, and they might, because he's big, muscular black man, even in the 2028, 2030, the racial divide is still so strong that people might still have a stereotype of him as a big, strong black man, but not very intelligent, which is not true. And yeah, about 10 years ago, I wrote this with the idea of, playing with that stereotypical thought, and that really horrible racist preconceived notion people would have of a large black man not being intelligent and not being able to do all this, and yet here he is and he can do that, and oh yeah, he can kick ass too. And as I've gone back and reread some of my work, including my Stepping Stone cycle, I start to realize that both my main characters have almost what you would call the black sidekick. So I don't know what that says about me, but it's meant that the sidekick is probably more, in many ways, more capable than the guy who's not the sidekick, the main protagonist. And I think Aristotle, maybe not Bill in the Stepping Stone cycle as much, but I think in Aristotle we've gotten through the books more. He's gotten to be a more in-depth, more rounded-out character, and you learn a lot more about him especially in the second and third books. But in the first book, he's the guy who saves Bridge's ass a number of times, and Bridge even recognizes that he's not, he doesn't treat him very well, because he's an asshole. Let's face it. But that he relies on him a great deal. I think that character actually resonates with a lot of fans too, because they seem the ones that have talked about it, they seem to like Aristotle. I love the character. I kind of chew him in wherever I can. So we meet Aristotle, and Aristotle literally stands over and watches Bridge get a beatdown because he's not gonna he's been told not to interfere. God damn it.